Hello and welcome back to Thread Sketching in Action. I'm Deborah Wirsu of deborahwirsu.com, and this week I have Thread Sketching in Action number 85 for you, Ancient Wisdom. Perhaps I'm subconsciously trying to get in the mood for Asia as I'm heading off on yet another music tour to China in a couple of weeks. But really, there were a number of things that led me to create this design. A love of digital imaging and design, a love of Asian art, particularly historic art, and a love of thread sketching, of course. So, combining these three elements is pure joy for me, really. As you can see, I've obviously spent some time creating the digital design that forms the background. I've built up a number of different layers containing elements for the design, including my drawing of the Wise Man, which was inspired by a work of ancient art from China in the 13th or 14th century. My aim was to make the background resemble marble, with the luminous depth of colour that marble has, and even though I say it myself, I'm pleased with the result, particularly as it is subsequently rendered on fabric. Due to the fact that this piece has been very securely stabilised, and my intention is to mount this in a frame, the only stitching required is working the actual figure. I did contemplate adding stitching to the background, but decided against that for a few reasons. I didn't want to detract from the existing image, nor cover it with a lot of dense stitching. And I also didn't want the piece to end up looking like a quilt. When I'm working this type of stitched art, I want it to look like art. Perhaps not quite like a painting, although some of my work does when viewed from a distance, but definitely art, made in textiles rather than pencil, ink or paint. The stitching is worked using free motion straight stitch, but with a lot of tiny back and forth movements. This gives the figure rather a sketched, almost scribbled appearance when viewed closely, and the constant back and forth stitching motion has created a slightly raised line of stitch. I find this visually interesting, and it makes what could be a very flat work into something a little tactile. I have to admit that, from a distance, this raised line of stitching isn't really visible, but the stitching effect, as though it were quickly sketched with a black pen, is visible. Another interesting point to note is that I just said this looks as though it were sketched with a black pen. In fact, when stitching this, I elected to use a very deep, dullish purple thread. The way we view this deep purple on a predominantly yellow background is that our eyes blend the colours a little, making the stitching look black. This piece, and particularly this section, necessitated a lot of stopping and starting, often with just 3 or 4 stitches worked each time. It's at times like this that I really appreciate having a machine with an automatic thread cutter. One of these is by no means a necessity, but it certainly is a wonderful time saver. There are many ways this design could have been worked, and the results would probably be just as good, simply different. Colour could be added, especially to the clothing and headdress, either with stitched thread painting or colouring with fabric paints or inks. But as I really do like the marble background appearance, I chose to leave the figure looking as though scratched into the surface of the stone. If you missed the release of my latest free ebook last week, Puckering when thread sketching and how to avoid it, then head over to my website at deborahwirsu.com, where you'll find a button on the home page which you can use to sign up to access the ebook. While you're there, you might like to consider taking an online class with me. You'll find them all listed at learn.deborahwirsu.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, bye for now.